Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Today I'm going to present to you the historical background of German Historical School. The German Historical School arose in 1840s. The peace treaty after the Napoleonic Wars left Germany divided into 39 separate states, most of them monarchical, almost all of them undemocratic. The German struggle against Napoleon had aroused patriotic and nationalistic emotions. Aspiration toward national unity remained unrealized for over a century, then were achieved under the stigma of losing World War I. Minor revolutionary outbursts in Germany from 1830 to 1832 were repressed, and the major upheavals of 1848 were crushed by Prussian and Austrian troops. Prussia dominated Germany. Foreign countries viewed Prussia as powerful ally. Native nationalists relied on Prussia to forge a unified Germany. Prussia dominated the German government and armed forces. Bismarck expressed the paternalism of monarchy and evoked loyalty and patriotism among the German workers. Because certain key economic institutions of 19th century Germany differed substantially from those of Britain, it is not surprising that a different economic ideology arose. Competition and freedom of enterprise, which the classes took for granted in their economic analysis, was severely restricted in Germany. Because of the large bureaucracy that administered and regulated manifold phases of German economic life, the science of public administration was highly developed. British theories were obviously inapplicable to the German situation. The historical school defended and rationalized the German way of life by questioning the historical relevance of the British classical economic doctrines. The Germany that gave birth to the historical school was divided, weak, and primarily agriculture. Nationalism, patriotism, militarism, paternalism, devotion to duty and hard work, and massive government intervention all combined to change the pattern and promote industrial growth. Because Germany of the mid-19th century was far behind England in the development of industries, its economic reason that government assistance was required for it to catch up.
Assalamualaikum, my name is NURSHATIQAH binti Abdurrahman. My matrix number is BB20161050. I'm going to present about major tenets of German Historical School. There were 4 major tenets in this school. The first one is evolutionary approach to economics. The historical school applied a dynamical evolutionary perspective in their study of society. The study was based on average innovation and advanced development. There was often an analogy drawn to Darwin's biological evolutionism that the social organism is formed, developing, growing, and eventually declines and dies, which conclude that the society will constantly change. Therefore, whatever economic doctrine seems relevant for a given country can be irrelevant to another country or an advanced age. The rationalist approach is particularly useful in targeting classical economics as being unsuitable for Germany. The second tenet is emphasize the positive role of government. The historical school was nationalistic while classical economics was informal. The German state fueled manufacturing, transportation, and economic development. During the political economy, it was simple to create an enthusiastic nationalist glorification of the government. In addition, historic school has highly noted that the government intervention in financial matters is important and underlines the perception that there are problems which is somewhat different from those of the individual. The third tenet is the inductive or historical approach. The economists of the historical school emphasize the importance of studying the economy historically as part of an integrated whole. Political economy could not obtain fair treatment unless compared with the other sectors of social science. The abstract, informative, static, unrealistic, unhistorical characteristic of conventional and marginalist methodology have been objected by the historical school. It was possible to research all the strengths of an economic phenomena and all aspects of economic behavior. Many economists in history were opposed almost any kind of theorizing. They denied that, with one exception, there were laws of economic legitimacy in which they thought development trends in history can be observed and can be implemented into laws of development. The fourth major tenet which is the advocacy of conservative reform. The historical economists pointed out that instead of simply analyzing motivation causing economic activity, the political economy must pester and calculate the moral value and outcomes of this act. It would describe an evolution of the proper manufacturing and distribution of capital in order to satisfy the request that there were both legal and religious justice. The view that German state should be granted to improve the common man conditions, raising the loyalty to the state while maintaining the factory workers' health, welfare, and productivity. It would help improve protection.
Next is whom did the historical school benefit or seek to benefit? The most benefited in this school was the members of the German historical school because they have close relationships with the government officials, so it facilitated them to dominant position in academic life. For example, Gustav von Hugo, he was known as a professor maker because he had such a great influence at Prussian Ministry of Education, and most of his students and followers were placed in academic posts. However, the German adherents of Austrian marginal school were excluded from university position, and the German imperial government also benefited in the historical school as its role in a nationalistic state were defended. Other than that, the German historical school also benefiting historical economists who serve dominant business, financial, and landowning groups. They create promoting moderate reform and later causing frustrated and drive for a more radical democratization of society. It was because concessions were given to them by paternalistic state instead of the poor and lowly fighting and winning their own battles for improvements who should be given benefit. Later, it causing servility, nationalism, and loyalty to the regime widespread in.
Assalamualaikum, my name is NURSHATIQAH JUANICO. I'm a student from HE07, which is from Mathematical Economics course, and my matrix number is BB2011064. I'm going to talk about how was the school valid, useful or correct in its time, and also which tenet of the school became lasting contribution. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about how was the school valid, useful or correct in its time. The evolutionary approach to the culture and to economic thought offer a valuable antidote and to the classical and marginalist school abstract thinking. This is because that new situations require new ideas and new theories. That is why we need to understand the changing history and environment as well as economic and social evolution to understand the present world. Moreover, the historical school economists were leaders in attacking individualism, understood that unrestricted market economy wouldn't necessarily provide society with the simplest result, and were correct in believing that if poor working conditions were allowed to continue, reforms would avoid worse upheavals. Next is about which tenet of the school became lasting contribution. First is the historical inductive method. This is because that the historical inductive method has become widely accepted because changing times and methodological debates have driven the two into an uneasy yet tolerable place union. There was an example for this statement, which is like the contemporary econometric analysis. It's because that both abstract theorizing and empirical research are typically included in contemporary econometric analysis. But however, if culture is continuously evolving and if new circumstances call for new studies, then there is only a little relevance to previous experience. Next is the assault on laissez-faire. The member of the historical school acknowledge that the best possible outcomes for society as a whole are not inherently created by unrelegated free enterprise. They also were right in their conviction that change can be a replacement for worse upheaval caused by sharpening class distinction. Lastly, the lasting contribution of the tenets that we can find is a final word, which is like the contemporary econometric analysis. It's because that both abstract theorizing and empirical research are typically included in contemporary econometric analysis. But however, if culture is continuously evolving and if new circumstances call for new studies, then there is only a little relevance to previous experience. Next is the that grew into a frenzied militarism that the German nationalism promoted by historical economists overreached itself. The expectation that the world will achieve prosperity, international cooperation, and universal harmony grew throughout the century that ended in 1914. A strident tone of nationalism hit the German historical economists, jarring these international feelings of goodwill. Their thought contributed perhaps unwittingly to the climate in Germany that led to World War I and II. So in conclusion, some of these theories raised by historical economists in this respect have been counterproductive to the development society. So that's all from me. This presentation will be continued with my teammates.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Today I'm going to present to you the contribution of Friedrich List. Friedrich List, born on 1789, became a government clerk and by 1816 had risen to the post of ministerial under-secretary, accepted a professorship in administration and politics at University of Tübingen, but dismissed in 1819. List active promoting strong political and commercial union of German state. In 1820, List advocated other administrative and financial reforms that considered very radical on his day. He favored doing away with tolls, tithes, state ownership of industries, feudal property, taxes, and limitation on productive land use and excise duty. He advocated trial by jury, a reduction in the number of civil service officers, and a single direct income tax to meet the expenses of government. The government regarded and sentenced List to serve 8 months in prison. In 1825 to 1832, he lived in United States as farmer, journalist, and business promoter. His protectionist ideas gained much more popularity in United States than in Germany. He returned to Germany and became ardent advocate of a railway network for Germany. The plans he presented for a German postal system and a national patent law were realized more than 20 years after his death. He went to France and there he wrote his most remembered book, The National System of Political Economy. Ill health, financial difficulties, and despair over the delay in German unification darkened his latter days, and in 1846 he committed suicide. List's main economic theories. First, economic based on productive powers. List considered that prosperity of a nation depended not upon the wealth, but upon its ability to develop productive force. These forces included scientific discoveries, advances in technology, improvements in transportation, the provision of educational facilities, the maintenance of law and order, an efficient public administration, and the introduction of a measure of self-government. Second stage of national development. There are 4 stages of economic development according to List. First, agriculture is encouraged by the importation of manufactured articles. Second, manufactures begin to increase at home. Third, home manufactures mainly supply domestic consumption. Fourth, exportation upon a large scale of manufactured product. Third, theory of national economic. Different from the views of Smith and Say, List contrasted the economic behavior of an individual with that of a nation. An individual promotes only his interests, but a state fosters the welfare of all citizens.
The next major figure is Wilhelm Roscher. His full name is Wilhelm Friedrich George Roscher. He was born on October 21, 1817, and he died on June 4, 1894. He is also known as 19th century German political economist, and he studied history and political, then became professor at University of Göttingen, then later at Leipzig. This is the example of his book, Principles of Political Economy. Roscher was condemned about the ideas he learned in classical school during his youth. His ideas include the role of state and its study methods. He tried to establish the laws of economic development by using the historical method from the investigation of histories legal, political, cultural, and other aspects as well. It also developed a cyclical theory where nations and their economies pass through youth, manhood, and senile decay. He also said that historical knowledge gained with the use of historical methods will eliminate the feelings of self-sufficiency and that higher civilizations will not look down with contempt on lower ones. Societies are continually evolving from immature to mature forms, which may be considered the most perfect. However, at the end, mature people will eventually deteriorate and finally decay.
The next major figure is Gustav Schmoller. He was born on 24 June 1838 in Heilbronn, Germany, and died in Bad Harzburg on 27 June 1917. He was the leading figure of the younger historical school and very influential in German academia in the latter part of the 19th century. He resurrected German historicism and ruled the German academic world of economics for several decades. During his academic career, he held appointments as a professor of political science at Halle, Strasbourg, and Berlin. Schmoller was an active member of the Academy of Science and the House of Lords of the Prussian Diet. He was also one of the founders and a major leader of the Association Social Policy. He then engaged in a famous controversy with Karl Menger, the founder of the abstract Austrian marginalist school. Schmoller's emphasis on historical research was repeated in his book Political Economy and its Method in 1894. Schmoller accused the older historical school of attempting to apply the lessons of history too quickly. He called for much more historical study in order to establish an empirical basis for national economic theory. Yet, despite the innumerable massive historical studies he and his disciples published, they failed to produce an economic theory, and their major contribution lay in the area of economic history. Late in life, Schmoller changed his views on protectionism. In his younger years, he had been an ardent advocate of free trade. By 1901, he favored a protective tariff for Germany, and he held Alexander Hamilton and Friedrich List as his teachers. He denied that the new era of protectionism had risen because economists and statesmen had been unable to understand the beautiful arguments for free trade. He justified tariffs on the basis of List's infant industry argument, but he went further than that. In addition, he felt that tariffs are international weapons that might benefit a country if used skillfully.
Next is Max Weber. Max Weber is a professor of a German sociologist and political economist at Freiburg and Heidelberg and Munich. Max Weber had published a book with the title The Protestant Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism on 1905. Max Weber has been known by his thesis of Protestant ethics that related to Protestantism to capitalism. Max Weber also rejected the Martian concept because he believed that religious doctrines are merely theological representation of real economic circumstances that are material. Not only that, the idea that he brings also has a power to influence social changes. It's because that Weber believed capitalism to be seemed to be an outcome rather than a cause of reformation. However, Max Weber's analysis was challenged by R.H. Tawney and others because they were arguing about the economic development were responsible for the transformation of Christian ethics and the changes in economic organization and social structure produced both Calvinism and capitalism. So in conclusion, the dynamic links between Protestantism and capitalism make it difficult to define cause and effect.